Hello and welcome to the last screencast about the final exam. I'm going to review about 20 problems. So basically, before you take, if some of you have done on the final exam already, for those of you who did not, this is to your advantage. So the primary objective of this whole of any company is basically to maximize the stock price per share and increase the stock's intrinsic value. And of course, the capital, the cost of capital, the objective for cost of capital or capital structure is to minimize the weighted average cost of capital. So now let's begin and do the first problem. Let's review this problem. Let us say you have to calculate the future value of $1,000. You say I'm going to put it for 3 years at 8% interest. This is semi-annual compounding. That means it pays interest twice a year. So how do you calculate that? So you can use Excel, enter your $1,000 as present value. You have 3 periods, but multiply this by 2 because this is semi-annual. 3 times 2 is 6 periods. And the interest per period would be 8% divided by 2. So here you click on the, go to your function wizard, click on future value. You're trying to calculate future value. Say OK, and a window will open up. So here in the rate, you're going to highlight this rate, but divide by 2 because this is a rate per period. Net periods is 3 times 2. You can either multiply 3 times 2 or you can enter 6. And the payment is 0. The present value is, put it as a negative amount, negative 1,000. Type is 0, which is at the end of the period, and this will calculate your future value. It is not showing the number because I didn't pull up the screen. So 1265.32 would be the future value. So, or you can do it via this formula also in the calculator. 1 plus I divided by n to the power of t times n, the number of time periods. So 3 times 2 is a 6, and the interest rate divided by 2. So this will give you this factor of 1.2653 and still comes up to the same answer. So that's how you would do that type of calculate the future value. Okay, let's do problem number 2. So in problem number 2, you own an oil well that will pay you $50,000 per year for 8 years, with the first payment being made today. Before you do the problem, question what is the problem asking for? So if you think a fair return is 7%, how much should you ask for if you decide to sell it? So you are calculating a present value of an annuity because it pays you $50,000 per year for the 8 years with the first payment right now. So you have to determine the present value of those $50,000. So discounted at the rate of 7%. So here you have $50,000. Enter that. This is the number of years that you will be receiving the payment, and that's the interest rate. So first calculate the present value of all these payments. Okay, let me insert a row here because let me undo that and insert a row right here. Okay, so, and I'll insert another row because I see that something else is missing in there. Okay, so now to calculate the present value of these 7 payments, you click on the function wizard. Let's do it here on the function wizard just to show you. More functions, click on the present value and say OK. So now you have present value right here. So the rate is 0.07. That's fine. Net periods is 7 because the first payment you're going to receive now. So put the periods as 7, and the payment is, put it as a negative 50,000. Future value is 0. Type is 0, and that will give you the present value of all these 7 payments. To this you have to add $50,000 because that's what you received now, to figure out what you should ask. So sum these two, highlight these two and click on the sum function, and this is what you should be asking for. Okay, so this is the amount that you would be asking, the price. So you're determining the present value of these annuity payments, $50,000 a year, discounted for 7 years, add back the 50,000 that you got this year, and then this is the present value of all your payments, and that's what you should ask for when you sell it. Let's do problem number 3. Suppose you borrowed 200,000 at a rate of 8% and you must repay it in 30 equal installments. Okay, and at the end of, how large should your payment be? So in Excel, so put down your numbers first. 200,000 in Excel, the 8% is the interest rate, 30 is the payments. Okay, so use the payment function in Excel. So highlight this and figure out your payment. So click on more functions, click on payment and say OK. So payment window will open up. For the rate, you just use the 8. Net periods is 30. Present value is how much did you borrow? That's what you borrowed. Put a negative sign and put that. Future value is 0. Type is 0 and say OK. So this is the amount that you would have to pay per period to if you borrow 200,000 at a rate of 8%. So let me delete that. So that's how I showed you how to do that formula. So figure out, enter all your values, figure out what function you need to use in Excel and use the payment function. Or you can even use the formula 1 plus 1 minus, solve the inside first before you do the outside, so that you can even get it via this formula. Brackets first. Okay, so during the last year, Ruth Corporation had sales of 300,000, net income of 20,000, its assets were 200,000. The firm's debt to total asset ratio was 40%. That means it has 40% debt. That means it had 60% equity. It financed 60% of it via equity and 40% was the debt. So they are asking you to calculate the firm's return on equity. So let's put our numbers down. We know 300,000 is sales, 20,000 is the net income. We know 200,000 it has assets, out of which 40% is debt. So we know 80,000 is debt. Okay, so what's the rate of return that it is getting on its equity? You divide the 20,000. Instead of the DuPont ratio, we can do the profit margin times the turnover times the equity multiplier. You can use this, or you can take the 20,000 income divided by the asset ratio of 120,000, because it is you made 20,000 on your $120,000 worth of assets. Okay, so you'll get the rate of 1.1667. Or you can figure out what is the debt to the total assets or profit margin. Take the profit margin divided by the total asset turnover times the equity multiplier, and you come up with the same answer. Next problem, Rangoon Corporation last year had 400,000. Sales were 400,000 and its total assets were 300,000. Average turnover, asset turnover for that ratio, total asset turnover at TATO, is 2.5. The CFO believes that it has excess assets that can be sold to bring it down to the industry average, affecting the sales. To achieve a ratio, it has a 1.33 ratio. So 400,000 is sales, 300,000 is assets. So we know total asset turnover ratio is sales divided by total assets. So 2.5 should equal 400,000 divided by total assets. So this is what we're trying to figure out, what our total assets are going to be. So when we solve for the equation, we know our total asset should be 160,000 instead of 300,000. So 300 minus the 160, so we have to sell $140,000 worth of assets, which is current assets minus assets sold as your new assets. So the company needs to sell 140,000 to achieve a total asset turnover ratio of 2.5. So you just set up the equation, sales divided by total assets. So this is what you're trying to solve for and figure out what your total assets are. 300,000 minus the 160 is 140,000. Okay, so let's do the next one. Acme Corporation has 5-year bond yields of 8.5%, 5-year T-bonds yield 5%, risk-free rate is 3, the default risk premium is 0.6, LP is 1.8 versus 0 on T-bonds, and the inflation premium is 1.5%. So they're asking to solve for the maturity risk premium. So you can enter all your 3 is the risk-free, 1.8 is the liquidity, 1.8 is the liquidity premium, 1.5 is that, and you're solving for MRP here. That is what you're solving for. So we know the required rate equals the risk-free rate plus the inflation premium plus the maturity risk premium plus the default risk premium and the LP. So we're simply plugging in all these numbers that we know. We know the corporate yield, this is the required rate, which is 8.5%. So corporate yield 8.5% equals 3% of risk-free plus the inflation premium of 1.5, default risk premium of 0.6, 1.8 of the liquidity premium plus the MRP. So this is what you're solving for. When you add all of these and deduct it, you come up with 1.6. So that's how you calculate that one. That's a simple problem. Let's do number 7. So XO Corporation has a 20-year 6% annual bond at the par value of 1,000 1 year ago. Today the market interest has dropped to 4%. They're asking for the new price of the bonds provided you have 18 years now left to maturity. So put your $1,000 par, 20 years is the maturity, 6 is the interest coupon, 4 is the market rate. So determine the present value of the bond, the price of the bond, so for the 18 years. So you click on this and the present value function. So the rate we entered as the 4%. Periods here, instead of 20 we are entering 18. Payment is 0. Future value is 1,000. Okay, because that's what we're trying to figure out. So the present value of the bond is 493. Now you have to calculate the present value of the interest payments. We know it pays a 6% interest coupon. That means it pays $60 a year. So let's click on the present value function here again. So in the present value rate function, we have the rate is again 0.04. Periods are 80, but now the interest payment is $60, negative 60. Future value is 0, type is 0, say OK. So when you add these two, this is the present value of that bond. That's what it should be selling at. That's what the market price, that's the worth of that bond as of today, 1253.19, based on the number of years to maturity. So use the present value function for the price of the bond, and then you can also use present value of the interest, and that you determine by the coupon rate. Let's do number 8. I'll stop at like midway at 12 questions, and then I'll do another recording. So Tisco's outstanding bonds have a $1,000 par value. They mature in 10 years. The yield to maturity is 10%, and it's semi-annual compounding. So note that, and the current price is 900. So what is the bond's annual coupon? Here you are solving for rate. Okay, and so you solve the interest rate. So use the $1,000, 10 years, 900 is the market, 10 is the yield to maturity. So 41.98 is the interest payment. So the payment, use the payment function to figure out what the payment is. So click on the payment function. So on the payment function, your rate is semi-annual. Take the rate of 0.10. This is the yield to maturity. Divide that by 2. Net periods, instead of 10, now they're 20 because it's a semi-annual. This is the market value of the bond. So enter the present value of the bond as negative 900. The future value is 1,000. Type is 0. So interest payment per period is 41.98. Now you have to double this because this is payment per period, so that you're receiving $83.95 per year. So now the next step you're going to determine is what is this interest rate on the $1,000 bond, which is $83.95 divided by 1,000 is 8.40%. So it is a two-step process. First you figure out the payment, use the payment function, figure out the payment per period, multiply it times 2 because it's a semi-annual compounding, and then figure out the total interest for the year, and then figure out the rate. The last thing you'll figure out is the interest rate. Okay, so let's do one more, couple more. Ruma's style stock has a beta of 1.5. Required rate is 21%, and the risk-free rate is 6%. What is the required return on the stock market? So you have to first find the market risk-free premium. Okay, so we know 21% is the required rate equals the risk-free rate plus the beta times the market premium minus the 6%. So we know 15, take away the 6 from this side, So 15% equals 1.5 times risk-free, the market risk premium, minus the 6%. So again, you solve for this. So you take